Okay, so remember our scenario of the matrix world. It is possible. It is possible that we are all plugged into a computer. It is possible that we are all plugged into a computer and we cannot tell it whether we are actually plugged in or not. We're actually plugged into a computer, and then the computer, oh my gosh, the neck is so large. The computer is telling us what to sense, how to feel. Right? So this is similar to the movie Matrix. Matrix. Similar to the movie Matrix, where Neo, the protagonist, was plugged into a computer through a cord in his back. So we don't actually know that. We cannot disprove that possibility. No. So although science has been discovering patterns, so discovering entities, discovering atoms, discovering subatomic particles, and discovering the interaction between them, it is possible that this too is just an illusion. No? It is possible that the structure and the interaction are illusions. These are possible. That's why even today, some people in science may question that there is actually an objective reality. So again, this is the conflict between two schools, no, of idealism and empiricism. Right? We know that science used empiricism as a foundation, as an assumption. No? Science assumed that there is an objective reality. Science assumed that there is an objective reality, that the cup, the water that you drank this morning, that's a true water. It's not a projection from a computer. This is empiricism. However, for idealism, it's not that idealists are not saying that this is absolutely false. In idealism, you claim that that is doubtful. Right? That is doubtful. Are you sure that that is actually a real water? Are you sure that you are holding an actual cell phone? So those are the claims of idealism. So, okay. As science progress, people are still divided between these two, idealism and empiricism. Again, this is a unresolved philosophical question. We do not know which is which yet. So it's unresolved. That's why people in science, although most of people in science usually uh, have empiricist worldview, some people have idealist worldview, and that's why here we have philosophies of science. They're divided into two: realism and then anti-realism. When we say realism, that means that science is knowing an actual objective reality. They're claiming, realist claims that we're actually knowing about the real world. For anti-realism, they're claiming that no, that such claim is highly dubious. No, we cannot tell. Because again, if we go back to our previous discussion, the grounds for anti-realism is these assumptions. No? These are not proven in science. So there's an objective reality shared by all rational observers. This is not proven. How can you prove that? Are you going to use science? Are you going to use empiricism to prove empiricism? No, you cannot. No? So these are the foundations of science, but they are not yet proven. Go back here. Oops. So that's why you have two camps, realism and then anti-realism. So the first one, the most realist, if you're going to draw a line chart, if you're going to draw a line chart, this, oops, let's say this is the center. On one corner, let's say this is realism here. So you're actually claiming, you actually believe that science is knowing about the objective reality of about the objective world. And then on the other side, you have anti-realism. Oh, it's possible that we are in the matrix, and science is not actually knowing about anything about reality. If you are an anti-realist, you may say, well, science knows about patterns, but those patterns are just it's possible that those patterns are just illusions from a machine. So that's why we have two positions, realism and anti-realism. The most extreme form of realism is called naive realism. Naive naive realism. Realism. Okay, so that's the most extreme form of realism, naive realism. So if you are a naive realist, this is the position of children. If you are a child, since you are born, you are actually a naive realist. You believe that there is an object in front of you. So if you are a naive realist, you believe that science is knowing about an objective reality 100%. You say 100% scientific knowledge is equal to objective reality. Okay, so this is the position of naive realism. So if you meet someone who says, well, scientific is 100% true, it tells us 100% true about the real world. If you meet that person, then that person is a adherent of naive realism, is a follower of naive realism. He is claiming that scientific knowledge is 100%. The scientific knowledge about the real world or the objective reality is 100% true. So what are the other positions? So we have naive realism, described here as the world I see is real. What are you arguing about? So this is 100% sure about the real world. Then we have scientific realism. Science make real progress in describing the real features of the world. So for scientific realism, so this is the second position. It's not very sure about the whether science is knowing about 100% objective reality. What it says is that so here around there, it's called scientific realism. I mean, okay, the second position is scientific realism. It says that, okay, I may not be sure that I'm knowing 100% about the real world. However, I can say that I am making progress. So the keyword here is making progress. Maybe, okay, for a scientific realist, maybe we know about the past, like say 10%. 10%. We know about objective reality at 10%. But now, we know about reality, let's say 20%. No. I don't think these are good numbers. because those are not actual numbers. No, actual numbers would be something like 80 and some 80% sure, or to 90% sure, something like that. Scientific realism. So there is actually a scientific progress, that is, we're actually knowing about real uh, objects or real worlds, the real world. So this is the second position. You believe in an outside world. The third is structural realism. Science has identified real patterns, relationships, and structure, at least with a specific domain in nature. So for structural realism, struct structural realism. So a person who believes in structural realism will say that, okay, maybe we're not very sure about the real world. We're not 100% sure. Or maybe we're not actually doing progress like 80 to 90 progress like 80 to 90% sure. But maybe we're actually progressing at 50% for structural realism. So structural realism is a position in science where, okay, so science can be divided into two actually. Uh, One is that you claim that scientific objects like atoms are real things, and then the other, structural realism, you claim that maybe we're not sure about the atoms. We're only sure about this connection of how atoms interact, how gravities interact with the planets, how gravities. So let's say this is the sun, and then this is the planet. Okay, maybe we're not sure about these things. What are these things actually? But we are sure about the green ones, or the interaction, this one, or the structure, this one. We're not sure about the yellow, so it's not claiming knowledge about the yellow, the entities themselves, but their interconnections. Paano sila nagko-connect-connect. Uh, so at least this is 50% sure, kalahati lang, 50% sure. This position is different from scientific realism, because you're also claiming that you know about the yellow objects or the yellow things. So most of us maybe are around here, naive realism or scientific realism. These are advanced, kumbaga, these are more philosophical. This is more non-scientific philosophy na positions, so structural realism. So you are denying knowledge about the objects themselves, only the connections. Okay, how about for anti-realism? For anti-realism, you're not claiming that there is that science is progressing towards knowing reality. Kumbaga, science, it is possible that science is just this one, an illusion. No, we're actually conducting experiments on an illusion. So what are positions in anti-realism? I think anti-realism is a position held by few scientists. Okay, we have constructive empiricism. Science aims us to give us theories that are empirically adequate but does not metaphysically claims about reality. So that's what science as what was that? Constructive realism. Unlike the philosophies on the left side, unlike here in realism, you're actually claiming that scientific knowledge is somehow correlated with reality. But for anti-realism, you're saying that okay, science can have something useful to give us, but we're not sure if it is actually the absolute reality. So it could be possible that science is just a another illusion, no, given to us by a computer. Oh, so it may be useful inside the matrix, it may be useful inside the computer, if you're leaving the computer, but it doesn't tell us about the outside world, like it doesn't tell us about the computer itself. So that is constructive realism. Does not justify metaphysical claims about reality. You can find patterns here. Wow, this is really quick. Bilis ng oras ah. You can find patterns here, but it has nothing to do. It may have nothing to do with the actual reality. The constructive realism. So maybe it's ambiguous. No? We cannot tell how much is the percentage. Maybe 0%, maybe 100%, 0 to 100. We cannot tell if science is actually discovering anything about the reality. So these are rare scientific position, constructive realism. And then we have instrumentalism. Theoretical concepts may be used in predicting observations, but we have no ontological commitments to them. So we're not sure about the real objects. Here. Ito. That object, we're not sure about its actual existence. Is it an illusion? Is it not? So, yeah, we have a useful theory explaining about their interaction, but again, they could be inside the matrix. So I think that was instrumentalism. No? Science is only useful, but it cannot tell us about the absolute reality. So that's what the instrumentalists say. So you can pick any philosophy about science here, no? You can say, I believe science is actually knowing about the reality. So you are a scientific realist. I don't know which one here. Are you a naive realist? You say that there is a 100% reality. Are you scientific realist? That there's only 80 to 90% reality. Are you a structural realist? Are we knowing about a reality about 50%? For anti-realism, you have a lot of other positions. Constructive, we're not very sure. Instrumental, well, it's useful, but we're not sure about the actual existence of these yellow objects, of these things. So again, we're not sure about that. So no commitment, kumbaga no commitment. 0 to 100%. And then we have the last one, relativism. If you've heard of moral relativism, this is very similar to it, no? So you have social constructivism. Scientific discoveries are influenced by culture. It's not actually objective, according to the relativist. And then epistemological anarchism. It means that you can select just any method and call it scientific. This is this is complete relativism, no? So you can select any scientific method. If you can select any scientific method, then science may have nothing to do with reality at all. So this is an extreme form of anti-realism, no? Relativism. Relativism. So cultures can select a method and call it scientific, so on and so forth. I don't think a lot of people hold these positions. There may be some people who hold this one, but most are here realist on this side. Okay, so however, it doesn't mean that even if most of us hold this position, scientific realism, it doesn't mean that this side is wrong. There's a possibility, there's also a possibility that they are actually right. No? On this side, they are actually right. And this one is the wrong philosophy to hold about science. But then again, you cannot resolve this question because this is deeply philosophical. Again, go back here. We cannot tell about this one. Okay, sige. So that's it for philosophy that you can hold about science. Are you a realist or are you an anti-realist? Okay. Now let's go to our next major topic. And this is something to do with, this has everything to do with the history of science, now the progress of science. Now we're going to talk about it in detail. So you have prerequisites. You should know about the philosophy of science, philosophy that you can hold about science. Number two, you should know about the assumptions of science, the foundations of science. These are not proven statement, but science rely on them. Then you should know about natural philosophy, the precursor of science. You should know what do we mean by intuitive. Then you should know what is the difference between experiments and observation. That's I think meron pa. Okay, so we're going to talk about history of science, that is the progress of science through different society. So we're going to talk about Aristotelian medieval worldview, the Cartesian worldview. Dami mga worldview Yan, sabi ko na nga kulang. Qualitative versus quantitative. The topics include Aristotelian medieval worldview, Cartesian worldview, Newtonian worldview, and then the current worldview or the contemporary worldview. So hindi lang pala tatlo, no? Last time we actually talk about gravity last time, and then we mentioned about Aristotelian method of Aristotelian explanation about gravity. We also about how Newton would explain gravity, and then we talk about how Einstein would explain gravity, which is very different. It is bending of space and things like that. But we haven't mentioned about the Cartesian worldview. But there are actually four general worldview. When science was evolving, it started here in Aristotelian, and then it became Cartesian, and then it became Newtonian, and then Then we have what we have now. Now the question is, what is the difference with these three? And then, what technologies are possible with each worldview? What is available tools? What are the available tools for the society to use? Okay, let's get started. First, we are going to talk about the prerequisites. What is this? History? Okay. So introduction first, no? So here we have a picture depicting our ancestors trading with the Chinese. There the Chinese. As you can see, so you know mga ancestors natin, their clothes are like this, no? May purong, lapu-lapu style, tapos may mga bahag, Ifugao style. But these are not Ifugao, no? These are I think these are Moros. I'm not sure. I think this is Moros. I think so. So yeah. So this is before Spanish invasion. So yan, these are our ancestors. They were trading stuff. And during that time, the Filipinos are respected by the Chinese, even the Japanese. I think the name Luzon, as far as I remember, the term Luzon is a Japanese or Chinese term, no, for something like clay pot from Luzon, from that land. So it's an international name. And the Philippines are known to be a good trade partner for the Chinese. So okay, so they were trading, and the Philippines was not a united country yet. There were a lot of kingdoms. So if you think about it, it's like this. There's our drawing. There were a lot of kingdoms. So you have Luzon here. You have here the Visay, Samar, and then you have here Leyte, and then you have here Palawan, and then you have here Mindanao, no, like Mindanao here, uh, and then you have other islands here. I think this is Panay. Then you have Negros, Cebu, something like that. So in the past, the Philippines is not a united archipelago. Although we are the same descent, called the Austronesian race or the seafaring race, as I've shown you, no, Philippines and Indonesia somewhere here below, they look the same.
So welcome.
Okay, let's continue. So back to the slide. Here we have our ancient uh, ancestors. It's not ancient, no. It's our historic in ancestors. Hindi naman ancient. Okay, so in the past, so the Philippines is not. There is no such thing as Philippines. No, it wasn't a country yet. It was not a unified country yet. It was a country composed of smaller sultanates, so smaller kingdoms. If you think of it, so you have a kingdom here in Tondo. You have one here, one, and then another here, I think. Then here, then you have the Raha Humabon, and then Magellan, and of course the Sultan of Sulu here, and the Maguindanao. I think the one here is Butuan, something like that. So there were all sorts of different territories, no? Iba-iba yung territory. Claiming different territories. No? That's why we also have, up until now, we have a claim on Sabah. No? Sabah. Here, Sabah. Because this territory used to be part of the Sultanate of Sulu. So, parang ganito yung ano niya eh. Parang ganyan. Something like that. No? Yung sakop niya. So, it's not a unified country yet. So, but because of the invaders, no, the invaders actually created the lines, no. It created the lines like this. So they did not recognize the invaders like the Spanish. No, they did not recognize the territories or the divisions by the sultanates. So talagang sinakop lahat. So that's why we can actually say that the Philippines is a young country. It doesn't have uh, uh, very deep historical relics like other countries like Egypt, India, or China. So it's a young country. Oh, so okay, there you have it. Different Zulu sultans. But then around 1500s, we have uh, an invasion from Spain. So here you have the natives or ancestors, and then you have the Spanish conquistadors. So everything changed, no, when the Fire Nation attacked. So everything here. So you have a change of culture, no, a lot of change in culture. So uh, Philippines was actually during that time when the Spanish invaded. Philippines was under the Sultanate of Borneo. So there is a sultanate here in Borneo. If you're familiar, then good. There's a country here called this. If this is Malaysia, no, we have a dispute with Malaysia. This is Borneo. Borneo. Borneo occupied, said to occupy the lower thirds and the upper thirds of the Philippine archipelago. So I think somewhere here, no, like this, and then like this, something like that, no. And in the middle, there's a mix, no. There is Hindu from even older empires, no. There is Hindu and there is also some Muslim. What they call that? There are some sultanates, no, Hindu and some sultanates. But this areas used to be Islamic and then invaded uh, by the Spanish, and then it was transformed into a Catholic, mostly Catholic. But actually, the part here in Ifugao was not invaded, was not in complete control. No? Hindi sila, kumbaga, although in theory, pag pinapakita sa mapa, nasakop yung Pilipinas, but there were no people controlling this area here, Ifugao. So that is pure Filipino culture, no? Before, pure Filipino culture, pre-Spanish culture, no? Ifugao here, yung mga Igorot, Tasandamoros here, ang mga Tausog here. on down south. So hindi sila nasakop. So, saan na ba tayo? Okay, while we're doing that in our history, so around, that was around 1500s, no? Philippines was discovered on 1500s. Then, around 40 to 50 years later, the Philippines was invaded by the Spanish. So, back then, the Philippines was under Borneo. No, malit, it's a small country right now, but it controlled the upper third and the lower third of the Philippines. Okay, so the Philippines was, during this period, 1500 to 700, the Philippines is being colonized. Now, while in Europe, something else is happening. There's a revolution. In this case, it is the scientific revolution. And this is, some people would say, you can actually hear this on some respectable people. They would say that one reason why Filipinos want international attention. So mga Pinoys, no, sinasabi na Pinoys tayo. We want attention, we want recognition from other country. Na makita tayo ng mga banyaga. We want Philippines like that, no? Because we don't actually have a renaissance to be proud of. Wala tayong ganito. Wala tayong renaissance so far in our history. Wala. Because what was happening was colonialization, mga polo e servisyo, mga that is forced labor, no, mga abuses, mga, well, it wasn't good during that time, 1500s to 700s. So, yeah. So, in Europe, something is happening called the scientific revolution. Sa Philippines, abuse pa rin, no? Patrabaho ka muna. Okay, so what was happening in Europe during that time? When the Spanish was colonizing us, when we are under the Spanish territory, so talagang sakto talaga around this period, 1500s to 1700s, ganun dun yung revolution. Timing na timing ng scientific revolution. So ano bang nangyari doon? So, ayan. So here we have a comparison. Ano nangyari sa Europe ito, no? There was an Aristotelian medieval worldview, nag-evolve siya, then naging Cartesian worldview, and then naging Newtonian worldview. By the way, both of these are, this is natural philosophy, and this is natural science, and then contemporary, and ngayon na. So while this is happening, ito yung nangyari sa Pilipinas. So around this time, this is 1900s. If you look at a 1,000 peso bill, kung meron kang hawak dyan na 1,000 peso, so ito yung ano natin, no, history. Ito yung kumbaga tunay, no, pure na ano natin, pure na history, mga anito-anita muna, no, ancestor worship. So what's happening on Europe was this Aristotelian medieval worldview, approximately this time. This is 900 BC, this is 500 BC, 900, 500. So there you have it. And then we also have influences from ancient Hindu empire. So this is an artifact, no, recovered and buried in the Philippines. Because I think this was in Palawan. So there's a lot of our language was influenced by the Hindu empire, like guru, like teacher. You call me guru, no? Teacher, that is actually a Sanskrit word for yung guru ng Hindu. No, mukha. Ano pa? Bathala. Yes, there is a Sanskrit word related to that. Ano pa? Bathala, mukha. I'm not sure about the Maharlika, but you can look at it online, no? Meron tayong mga words that came from the Hindu-Buddhist traditions. So may influence din sa Pilipinas, although this is not very visible. And then you have the Tausog here. So there you have, no, may mga colorful clothing. So it's very different from the usual Arab, no, because Arab usually wear black or white, but our ancestors wear colorful clothing, mga ganito, daming accessory. Okay, so these are pure hindi naman pure kasi may halong may halo na influence. And then you have our relics. So it's question of why the Philippines does not have relics. Well, we have relics, no? Unlike Indonesia, Indonesia have Hindu relics, but the Philippines have ancient churches during the Spanish era. So these are our relics. Well, this was going on in the Philippines. No? Ito yung nangyari sa Europe. There were evolving something else. No? Okay, now let's talk about this, all of this. Tag-isa-isayin natin. So yun nga, we don't have Renaissance. Okay, here you have a picture of a TV series, no? Encantadia. You can see here you have fire, water, air is green. I think green is earth, and then air. This is a concept derived from Aristotelian. From Aristotelian four elements. There is a dog. My dog, my dog. Sony pala. Okay, this is based on four elements from Aristotle. So this is another influence from Europe. Okay, before we dive into what developed in Europe, let's talk about the prerequisites first now. I think this is a review because we talk about it. Now I'm going to ask you questions. Aside from Encantadia, what media have you encountered that uses the concept of four elements? Anyone in the class? Yung mga may mga four elements.
Avatar, sir.
Avatar.
Movie na Avatar.
The animation. The
Avatar.
Legend of Aang. Yes. That's a very good one. That was my favorite. In fact, it is still my favorite cartoon. I watched it long time ago, when it was released. So it was still my favorite up until today. What else aside from Avatar? How about games? There are games that uses elements. Water elemental, earth elemental, air elemental, fire elemental. Okay, so
Mobile Legends.
Mobile Legends, we have water. Sino ba yung mga water elemental natin doon? Si Kadita. Kadita is water elemental.
Kadita. Valir, sir.
Okay, so you have the four elements. Lagay natin yung four elements. So Kadita.
Veterano sa ML, sino yun?
Kadita. Wait, naglalag siya. So Kadita, Kadita is water element. Sige, who else? Kadita, water. You mentioned another one. Sino yun yung another one? Kadita.
Si Valir, sir.
Okay, Valir is air type.
Fire.
Fire.
Ay, fire. Tama. Fire. So for those who don't
Tapos si Bale, sir.
Si Vale is air. And then earth.
Grok.
Grok. We have Grok. So
Diyan yata tayo mag-open yata ng room dyan eh. Kasi kayo rin?
Pero kasi nga tayo.
Wala nga eh.
Patanggal kami.
Tigil ka na, kirinig mo siya.
Damit ko muna kaya. So naglalag siya, sandali lang ha. So hindi na kayanan, sobrang dami ng program. Anyway, so yun. So you have, you're familiar with Valir. So for those who gusto ko ipakita, to give you an idea. So sayang, talagang hindi kaya na. Ayaw na ng Chrome. To give you an idea. Okay? So you have the four elements, and each element has certain characteristics, so the question is, what characteristics are associated with the fire element? Anyone in the class? Sige, pag maka-bullseye, I'm going to give you a point. Fire element, characteristics associated with the fire element.
Uncontrollable, sir.
Uncontrollable, that's a good one. Okay, 1 point for you. Celia, are you the one who's recording points?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, record that one. Uncontrollable.
Yes po.
Yes, that's a very good one. What else? Fire. Uncontrollable, spontaneous, or dangerous,
Explode.
exploding, or destructive. Ganyan, no? Even in Avatar, ganun talaga yung fire. Even in Encantadia, siya yung kalaban, no? The fire element, siya yung kalaban. Because fire is a very destructive element compared to water, earth, and air. Fire is the most destructive among them. Now, let's have earth. Anyone? Earth. If a person has, si Grak, what are the characteristics of Grak? The mga earth-based.
Depends.
Defensive. Okay, give 1 point, another 1 point. No? Hard or defensive. Okay, how about the air element?
Balance.
Balance. Okay, that could also be used to describe a person with water element. No? Balance or cool. Aside from that, air. Okay. So air is the opposite of earth. If earth is hard or high defense, air is the opposite, weak defense. Usually air like so mga air talagang mahina siya, no, the weakest. If you have watched anime na may mga yung there are characters with fire, earth, and then water, they're usually strong, no? And the air is the weakest one among them because it is the opposite of earth. So usually protagonists hold like Black Clover. Although in Black Clover, what's that? One of the character there is using air element. He's actually strong because he has high mana. We call it mana. But air is related to being weak or fragile. How about water? Anyone? Water?
Yun na, sir, balance.
Balance. Aside from balance, we already mentioned that one. Balance. What else?
Go with the
Go with the flow. Water element. Go with the flow. That's a very good, cool one. No? Cool description. I think that's a good one, no? For water elements. So water elements are go with the flow. Fire are initiators. So mag-initiate yan. Siya mag-start ng mga activity. Kumbaga, anong tawag dito? May initiative. High initiative. No? Earth are, kumbaga, solid. Pang defense. Kumbaga, bouncer. By the way, 1 point for that. No? Go with the flow. Earth. Mga solid. So, Fire Nation, you can think of this as the ancient Japanese empire. No? Initiate invasive invaders. No? Fire. And then Earth, mga defensive like yung mga bansa na hindi na nanakop, no, defense lang, like China, ancient China, I think it is earth type. So wala, steady lang, doon lang sila. And then you have the air, the nomads, yung lumalakad-lakad, mobile, no, napakalikot nila, but also weaker. And then you have the water. Filipinos are actually described as a go with the flow type of people, and there's a reason for that. Our ancestors used to be water-faring. Ano sila? Kumbaga, if you have Vikings in Europe, and then you have the Mongolian raiders, no? For our ancestors, the Austronesian, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, we have naval, kumbaga, mga pirates, no? Mga naval force, no? Water naman yung atin, water technology. And Filipinos are known to be very hospitable people, no, mga go with the flow, very adaptable people. They can go to the other country and mix well with them. So those are the characteristics of Filipino people. Go with the flow. Okay, this is this is archetypical. Kumbaga, it may not be accurate, no? Kumbaga, meron namang mga exemptions with these four, but it is highly archetypical. That's why, in ancient Greece, sandali pa pala, so philosophy of science, we are going to go there, no, sa four elements. So, review, again, philosophy of science, position of scientific discoveries with respect to reality. So, you can have very different sureness about the reality. No? Some of you may think it's an illusion, some of you may not. But most of you, I think, is not thinking that it's illusion. Now, you have the assumptions, foundations of science. They're not proven philosophically, but they are admitted. You must, actually, if you are an honest scientist, you must admit that your science, itong science na to, is not a foolproof, methodology. So, it's actually, kumbaga, parang ano lang yan guess. We created a guess and then we try to figure out where the guess would lead us. And so far, it has led us here. Ito yung mga cellphone, mga online teaching. This is a result of a guess. Quote unquote, a guess. No? Not proven, but we should admit that we have assumptions. The natural philosophy is a precursor of science. Intuitive. When we say something is intuitive, then it is easy to understand. No need for complex reasoning. So, madali lang siya. Then we have observation versus experiment. So this is just the distinction. Some of you give this one, no? Identify the distinction between observation and experiment. It's the distinction between natural environment and artificial environments. Then quantitative and qualitative. When we say quantitative, it's about measurements, while qualitative is about descriptions. So for example, if I tell you that your classmate is 1.5 meter tall, then I'm giving you a quantitative description. If I tell you that your classmate is brown in color, so we have a qualitative example. Color brown, brown in color. Okay, so we have, balik tayo sa four elements. So it's a archetypical, kumbaga, knowledge. Actually, the Chinese also have similar four elements, but they, instead of four, they have five. So if you watch Naruto, there are five. Lima yung elements nila. You have lightning. You have air. You have the fire, water, lightning, and then earth. Yung plant nila, earth. So that was the Chinese elements. No, so it's so archetypical. Napaka-archetypical niya. People can figure it out. It's intuitive. It's intuitive that there is fire, and fire is different from water, and water is different from air, and air is different from earth. So those are very different from each other. And the question is, why are there only four? Why not five? Because the Aristotle was more systematic on identifying the elements. Actually, may combinations to it. Pakita ko na. So it's taking a while, no? It's taking a while. So describe ko na lang dito. Far and earth belong to the category hot. Pwede ka maglagay dito ng word. Dry, hindi pala. Lagyan mo dito dry. Dry. And then yung opposite niyan, lagay mo dito wet. Lagay mo dito wet. And then here you have hot. And then dito cold. So apat lang talaga yung possibility. Dry and cold, earth. Hot and dry, fire. Tapos dry and wet, air or moist. Yung parang yung moist or vapor, no? And then cold and dry, you have cold and wet, you have water. dito pala yung cold and wet, you have water. So, apat lang talaga yung element niya. You can look it up online, no? So, it's not very important. But, the Aristotelian have this worldview that the world, itong planeta natin, is only made up of four elements or combinations thereof: fire, air, water, and earth. Because of this belief, they have a particular way of viewing uh, aspects of reality. So we have kinematics. No, kinematics is the study of motion, and I give you uh, the Aristotelian kinematics. No, according to Aristotle, there are light elements, fire, and then there are water elements like water and earth. So these are heavy, and heavy elements tend to move towards the center of the universe. No, while light elements tend toward to go up. So this is Aristotelian explanation of why apples fall. No, if apples fall, why apples fall? Because apples are a combination of earth elements, water elements and earth elements. So combination ng dalawa. And heavy elements tends to move towards the center of the universe. While air and fire, no, usok, if you boil water, no, pataas yung ano niya, yung movement. Because according to him, those are their natural, kumbaga natural positions, no, up and below. So this is Aristotelian motion. What else? In medicine, according to Aristotle, you have people have four bodily fluids, no? Four bodily fluids associated with the four different elements. So yellow bile, phlegm for water, blood for air. Although pula yung color niya, this is air, hindi yellow. So blood for air, and then the black bile. So according to Aristotle, if your natural four elements is not balanced, so yung nag-balance itong apat na to, there's a good possibility that you will be sick. Magkakasakit ka. So in ancient Greece, if you are low in blood, what they do is tell you to drink solutions that increases your blood balance. So example is wine, no? So yun, example nila wine. And for yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, they have a different herbs associated, no, to adjust their value. So if you have too much black bile, then you may drink this liquid. If you have too much phlegm, you may drink this liquid, and so on and so forth. They also have bloodletting. If you have too much blood, then you better let some of your blood go out of your body. Bloodletting. So this is Aristotelian medicine, based on the four elements. So you can look it up online. So yeah. Psychology. So psychology is also based on the four elements, based on the four body fluids. We have chloric personality, phlegmatic personality, sanguine personality, and melancholic personality. So some of your classmates may belong more or less to these categories. But then again, these are boxes, no? It may accurate or it may be not. So some of your classmates are lively, like sanguine, action-oriented. No? So ganun siya yung characteristic niya. And then you have the opposite, melancholic. So parang laging na lang sad. Laging sad, laging drama. Kumbaga, if you try to if you try to correlate this one to the 5-factor test, no, when you say melancholic, high in introversion, tapos high in neuroticism, so lagi siyang sad. Now, while sanguine, high on extroversion, and then high on openness. So it's very explorative person. Then you have the sad, and then you have the angry person, the chloric, easily irritated. This is also high in neuroticism, high in extroversion, high in neuroticism. So you have the person who gets easily angry, and then you have the phlegmatic. Phlegmatic person are associated with being, kumbaga, cool-headed or poker face. Kumbaga wala lang, like very low emotional changes. no, unlike the chloric personality. Chloric are easily to irritate. So, may mga personality, ano na sila, kumbaga categories. So, most of the time, you may actually fall into one of these category. Are you sanguine, melancholic, chloric, or phlegmatic? So, this is Aristotelian philosophy. What else? Astrology. So they already have astrology on ancient Greece. And here we have the symbols of astrology. I don't know exactly what are these. I know this is Pisces, no? The fishes. I think that is Pisces, and then you have this. I think this is Ram. So again, you have this the zodiacs represent the zodiacs has correlation to certain elements. So you have the fire elements, this one, you have the earth elements, and then you have the air, and then you have the water. So if you, depending on when you are born, so this may have relation to your personality type, chloric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. So it's still the same elements, no? Four elements. What else? Cosmology. So ayan, no, Aristotelian cosmology, you have the earth at the center of the universe. By the way, it's not only solar system, no, universe talaga yan. The earth, and then you have the water here, the less dense, and then you have the air here, and then you have the fire element here. And then you have the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the sun. They already know these planets, some of the planets. They call them the reason why they call them planets is because they move. Kumbaga, they are stars that move. Kumbaga, planets is derived from a Greek term, little wanderers, no? Unlike the rest of the stars, which are more or less steady. These stars, kumbaga, these stars are moving. Tiny stars, they move. Their position changes. So they already have mapping about the universe. They're already tracking the stars. So there you have it, the Aristotelian worldview. Ganon, 4 elements, everything is 4 elements. Okay, then later on, it was changed. Around 1500s. Okay, so it was changed. So in summary, so natural philosophy, we have here a picture depicting Aristotle. So we have intuitive, knowing about the world. So kumbaga, easy to understand, no? No logic, systematic, easy to understand. No math, no? It's observation based on observations, not experiments. And then you have qualitative description about the natural world. So these are the foundations of natural philosophy. So it's observations. According to Aristotle or the natural philosophers, you're not allowed to modify the environment, because if you're going to modify the environment, you may affect the 4 elements, and your conclusions will not be correct about the environment. And also, they describe changes qualitatively. So descriptive yung pag-describe ng changes. So but later these three tenets will be replaced. Itong tatlong to, it will be replaced by natural science. So what are the replacement? So, why did we replace? This is okay. Parang okay naman to. Now let's go to the next worldview, which is the Cartesian worldview. Okay, according to Cartesian, he is the famous in saying "Cogito ergo sum," or "I think, therefore I am." So there are a lot of philosophy joke derived from that. One of them is that there was once a philosophy class. And then when the students entered, the teacher was there in the class, standing in front of his table. And he said, okay, before we start our class, let's check the attendance. Okay. And he added, Before we check your attendance, let's debate whether you exist or not. So that was the joke. Now they're not sure if you are actually existing or not. So he was the person responsible for that one. Why? According to Rene Descartes, no, to be sure that you are not influenced by your beliefs or by your previous theory. Again, we discuss about this, the theory ladenness. No, this is where your theories are affecting your observations. If your observations are really intuitive, then if you doubt everything, then you must get the same conclusion. So basically, you have here the tenets of the foundations of natural philosophy: intuition, observation, and quality. It should be qualitative, no, not quantitative. I actually got confused. It should be qualitative. No. So wait. So what he did is ask people to doubt everything. Doubt everything Aristotle taught them. So what did he arrive? He arrived to this one. Instead of intuition, let's use hypothesis. Instead of pure observation, let's try to use experimentations. Instead of qualitative description, let's try to use mathematics to describe changes. So how did he arrive there? So he has a logic. Meron siyang logic. There you have it. If your philosophy is so intuitive, then if you doubt everything, you should reach the same conclusion. So we have here his steps. Okay, if you doubt, ito yung steps niya. How did he arrive to? Here's actually a conclusion here, a final conclusion here. No? So, if you doubt, then this implies that your mind exists, because you cannot doubt without a mind. No. If you doubt everything, so kumbaga yung mind lang yung nag-exist. If you doubt everything, then you can conclude that mind exists. And the property of the mind is to think. If you think, then you can think of a perfect being. But that perfect being must exist in reality. So ito yung proof niya. You can look at this in detail. Ganun yung proof niya. No? If you can think of a perfect being, then it must exist in reality. So God exists yung conclusion niya. If God exists, then He will not allow deceptions like the Matrix. Therefore, the objective reality exists. So this is Cartesian view.